A man cuts a snake in half while digging a grave, and the next day he falls ill, bedridden, with blood oozing from the corner of his eye. He hallucinates, seeing the snake he had killed crawling on the ground. In desperation, he seeks out a feng shui master named Kim, asking him to find the dead snake in the grave and offer it peace. Kim goes to the cemetery to dig up the grave and finds the snake, only to discover, to his horror, that its head bears a human face, terrifying him. The story begins with the witch Hwarim. One day, Hwarim and her fellow apprentice Bongil are invited to the United States. It is rumored that Park Ji-young, an American businessman, gets in trouble because his youngest son has been crying non-stop since birth, and doctors can't explain why. After entering the room, Hwarim blows a whistle at the baby, as if listening to something only she can hear. Blowing the whistle is a soul-searching spell, as spirits are said to respond to the sound. After blowing the whistle, Hwarim takes a small linen bag from the box and places it on the baby's chest, then checks his pupils. Meanwhile, the junior shaman Bongil chants prayers over the child. After her examination, Hwarim informs Park's wife that similar symptoms have appeared in the child's father and grandfather. Hearing this, Park's wife is shocked, as she has never believed in spirits before, and clearly, Hwarim is right. Hwarim and Bongil then head to Park Ji-young's home. Park Ji-young is the baby's father, and his ancestors are of Korean descent. His brother died in a psychiatric hospital, and Park himself, whenever he closes his eyes, hears screams and feels someone clutching his throat. Hwarim suspects that the family's ancestral graves have issues that affect the bloodline and inheritance. Simply put, the ancestors are not at peace, thus suppressing the descendants. However, as a witch, breaking the curse is like stepping into another world, so she needs to find an expert. She recommends feng shui master Kim Sang-deok. In the field of feng shui, Sang-deok is a top expert in the country, proficient in the study of yin and yang and the 5 elements. He can even tell the fortune of a cemetery by tasting a bit of its soil. That night, Hwarim and Bongil return to the country to visit Sang-deok, hoping he can help. Upon learning of the lucrative payment, Sang-deok immediately agrees and brings his partner, Young-jun. Young-jun is a mortician who manages funeral affairs and knows a little about feng shui. Hwarim explains that Sang-deok and Young-jun only need to relocate Park's grandfather's grave, but Park insists that after the relocation, the body should be cremated without opening the coffin. This request confuses Sang-deok because traditionally, coffins should be opened and bones cleaned before relocating a grave. Park's request violates conventional practice, but Sang-deok decides to visit the cemetery before making a decision. The cemetery is located in Gwon Province, Korea. After winding up a mountain road and climbing a barren hill, the graveyard sits at the top. Sang-deok and Hwarim find it strange that the cemetery is built on a hill, as it doesn't conform to feng shui principles. Once they arrive, Sang-deok becomes even more uneasy. The cemetery is sparse and desolate, with nameless tombstones and groups of foxes wandering around the graves. In feng shui, foxes are considered an ominous sign, conflicting with the cemetery's energy. Park explains that the simplicity of his grandfather's cemetery is due to rampant grave robbers. Nevertheless, he firmly believes this is a feng shui treasure because a monk named Gwon chose the site, who is said to have made significant contributions to the nation. After checking the surrounding feng shui, Sang-deok decisively refuses the commission. Hwarim asks why, and Sang-deok bluntly admits that the cemetery is an extremely dangerous location, with strong negative energy that could endanger everyone involved. Park insists that Sang-deok help, pleading with him to save his newborn son. Sang-deok questions if Park is hiding anything. The back of the tombstone has 2 rows of numbers providing the precise latitude and longitude coordinates of the cemetery, accurate to 4 decimal places. Sang-deok believes that the monk Gwon had other intentions, but Park denies hiding anything. For safety reasons, Sang-deok still refuses to help. At this point, Hwarim proposes using the substitute sacrifice method. The substitute sacrifice method involves sacrificing animals to appease the gods, allowing them to substitute for humans in transferring misfortune and repelling evil spirits. Both the ritual and the relocation of the graves must occur simultaneously. On the day of the grave relocation, Hwarim first prepares 5 pigs and 5 workers born in the year of the pig. She stuffs the workers' hair into the pigs' mouths, symbolizing a connection between them and the pigs. Then the workers begin digging up the grave. At this point, the evil energy from the tomb transfers into the pigs' bodies, and Hwarim's task is to dispel the negative energy through her shamanic rituals. While the apprentice Young-jun chants sacrificial blessings, Hwarim officially begins her ritual. At its climax, the pigs are slaughtered and the workers start unearthing the grave. They soon unearth the coffin, and Sang-deok notices that it is covered in a deep red burial cloth and made of redwood, a material previously reserved only for nobles and royalty. The grave-breaking process goes smoothly, and the workers lift the coffin to the surface before loading it onto a vehicle for cremation. Unexpectedly, one of the workers becomes greedy, wanting to see if there are valuable burial goods in the grave, but almost gets bitten by a snake. In a panic, he chops the snake in half with a spade. After the snake dies, the clear sky suddenly becomes overcast, and a downpour begins. Sangdeok warns Park that cremating a body in the rain would prevent the deceased from reincarnating into a good family, so he suggests temporarily storing the body in the hospital morgue. Park agrees, and since they aren't allowed to open the coffin, mortician Youngjun simply places the entire coffin into the mortuary. Unexpectedly, while Youngjun is eating, one of the workers opens the coffin lid without permission. As soon as the lid is lifted, a cloud of black bursts out, and Hwarim faints on the spot. When she regains consciousness, Sangdeok and the others learn that an evil spirit has escaped from the coffin, the spirit of Park's grandfather. Park's father, who is mentally impaired in America, hears his late father's voice calling him to open a window that night. He complies, but when he does, his father's evil spirit appears on the window glass. Shortly after, the spirit snatches his son's heart, and an elderly woman in the house unknowingly dances with the spirit before she is killed. Hwarim knows that this spirit holds a deep grudge and will kill all of its close relatives. As a descendant of the spirit, Park is now in danger. Hwarim instructs Sangdeok to return to Seoul to visit Park while she remains in Gwon Province to conduct a soul-calling ritual. As Hwarim had predicted, Park is found unconscious in a hotel bathtub. The ritual preparations are complete, and Hwarim plans to summon the evil spirit into her apprentice Bongil's body. During the ritual, Park awakes in the bathtub, and the spirit successfully enters Bongil's body. The witch confronts the spirit, asking it to let go of its resentment and stop harming people. But the spirit refuses and insists on taking all its descendants. Suddenly, Bongil spits out black water, and the spirit flees from his body. At this moment, Park receives a call from Sangdeok at his hotel, saying he will be there soon. Strangely, Sangdeok's voice also seems to come from outside the door, leaving Park confused about whether to trust the Sangdeok on the phone or the one outside. The voice on the phone sounds sincere, urging Park to open the window, claiming that his grandfather would bless him. In despair, Park chooses to trust the voice on the phone and opens the window. However, he soon hears an evil laugh through the phone. When he realizes it's too late, his grandfather's spirit has already cast a shadow on the ceiling. When the real Sangdeok bursts in, the possessed Park mysteriously stands atop the coffee table, giving a passionate speech in the tone of a Japanese soldier about the greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, before coughing up blood and collapsing. As Sangdeok tries to explain the situation to Park, he says in Japanese, "The fox has broken the tiger's waist." After uttering this sentence, Park twists into a strange posture and dies, and his grandfather's evil spirit immediately realizes the danger and escapes. Sangdeok instructs Park's secretary to contact the United States urgently, as they need to cremate the grandfather's remains immediately. If they don't act quickly, Park's youngest son will be the next victim. Sure enough, in the hospital room in the US, an old hand keeps moving in front of the baby, and the baby's vital signs begin to weaken. Fortunately, Youngjun is able to obtain permission from the deceased at the last moment and successfully cremates the grandfather's body, along with the coffin. During the cremation, the old man before the baby turns to ashes in agony, and the baby survives. Sangdeok thinks it's all over, unaware that the real terror has just come. After the cremation, the worker who killed the snake while disturbing the grave suddenly falls ill. Sangdeok visits him, and the worker believes he has been punished for violating a taboo, asking Sangdeok to find the snake that had been cut in two and conduct a ritual for it. Sangdeok returns to the mountain where the grave is located, first spreading salt around the grave before digging it up. Sure enough, he finds the snake inside. Strangely, the snake that had been cut in two seems to still be moving, with a human face, making it utterly terrifying. Sangdeok is further shocked to find a coffin beneath the snake, revealing a rare double burial. More peculiarly, the coffin is standing upright and wrapped in dense iron chains, seemingly to prevent it from being opened from the outside. Sangdeok calls Hwarim and the others, and after discussion, they dig up the upright coffin and transport it down the mountain. This time, Sangdeok does not send the coffin to the hospital morgue, but instead keeps it at a temple called Huga Temple halfway down. A few days earlier, Sangdeok had noticed that the sign for Huga Temple bore feng shui symbols. The monks called it a feng shui treasure, a tradition spanning hundreds of years. Sangdeok explains to the monks his intention to spend the night and temporarily place the coffin there, and the monks agree. Sangdeok and the others carry the upright coffin into the temple's warehouse, while Hwarim asks the monks for glutinous rice and sprinkles it around the coffin. She then pours horse blood over the rice. As a witch, Hwarem feels that what is inside this upright coffin might be even more dangerous than the evil spirit of Park's grandfather that had been in the grave. Sangdeok finds a crimson burial cloth, which bears his grandfather's identity, indicating that his grandfather was a high-ranking official in the Governor General's office during Japanese rule. This identity means that his grandfather was not a patriot, but a pro-Japanese traitor. Sangdeok suspects that the monk Guan, in order to punish his grandfather, had falsely claimed that the evil cave was a sacred place where he should be buried. But his aunt denies this, revealing that Guan was actually Japanese. She is puzzled as to why their grandfather, loyal to Japan, was buried in an evil cave. She instructs Sangdeok and the others to handle the upright coffin themselves. After consulting with Hwarem, they decide to cremate the upright coffin early the next morning to avoid any trouble overnight. Hwarem asks a senior sister about Guan. The sister reminds her that Guan was a famous Japanese fox demon who mastered the art of yin and yang and was said to have reached the pinnacle of the 5 elements. The senior sister's words leave Hwarem uneasy. Deep in the night, a blood-soaked monk suddenly appears in front of Bongil, mumbling, "Someone has taken out their liver." In panic, Bongil quietly draws a protective talisman, and the strange vision in front of him finally vanishes. Realizing something is wrong, he gets up to investigate but finds that the monk is no longer in the room. The warehouse door is intact, but as he approaches the nearby pigsty, he sees that the hearts of more than a dozen pigs have been removed. Not far away, a huge ghostly shadow is devouring monks' bodies with abandon. Bongil quickly wakes Hwarem and they rush to check the warehouse, only to find that the upright coffin has been damaged and its contents have escaped. Next to the opened upright coffin, Hwarem finds a helmet that belonged to a Japanese general from a century ago. At that moment, the blood-covered general appears at the entrance. It turns out, inside the upright coffin lay a zombie general from Japan's Warring States period. Hwarem is terrified and lies about being a subordinate of the general, but her deception is quickly exposed. Hwarem flees, and Bongil comes to assist her, only to be severely wounded by the general. Fortunately, they are in a Buddhist temple, and the general clasps his hands together and eventually turns into a wisp of flame drifting through the air. Sangdeok and the others rush over after hearing the commotion, and in the firelight, all the onlookers' fears seem clearly exposed. Bongil is taken to the hospital due to his injuries, and Hwarem shares her assessment with Sangdeok. In the world of witchcraft, ghosts have no physical form and cannot be seen, so humans can defeat them. However, the Japanese general they encountered has feet and a shadow. He is not a ghost, but a spirit entity. A spirit entity refers to the soul of a person or animal attached to an object, evolving over time. The Japanese Warring States era occurred over 500 years ago, so why is this general's spirit found in Korea and buried in a mountain grave? Hwarem cannot explain for the moment. Bongil, who has been seriously injured by the general, becomes possessed by the evil spirit. Hwarem summons her senior sisters to cast spells together. The general-possessed Bongil tells the others that the general had killed tens of thousands of enemy soldiers on the battlefield. When asked about the general's whereabouts, Bongil repeatedly recites the coordinates on the back of the tombstone. Meanwhile, in the hospital corridor, Sangdeok notices a painting depicting the Cheongcheong mountain range, known as the backbone of the Korean peninsula. The word backbone reminds Sangdeok of Park's last words, "The fox broke the tiger's waist." To confirm his suspicions, Sangdeok returns to Huga Temple. A monk had once told him that there were rumors that treasure was buried in the nameless grave on the mountain, attracting many grave robbers. Some even left their equipment at the temple. Sangdeok opens the equipment in the warehouse and finds a group photo labeled Iron Blood Brigade. The back of the photo reads, "My land, my comrades." Combining this impassioned declaration with the resolute expressions of the members in the picture, Sangdeok speculates that the Iron Blood Brigade was not a group of grave robbers. To confirm his suspicions, Sangdeok uses the Iron Blood Brigade's equipment to dig up the mountain grave and unexpectedly discovers a general's corpse. After meeting with Hwarem and others, Sangdeok speculates about the current situation, believing that the general's appearance indicates he has returned to his original position. The phrase, "the fox cut the tiger's waist," refers to the Korean peninsula because its shape resembles a crouching tiger, and the coordinates on the back of the tombstone are at the tiger's waist, the 38th parallel north. The fox represents the monk Sanggi, also known as the Japanese fox demon on Myoji, who built a grave at the tiger's waist and hammered in an iron nail, splitting the Korean peninsula along the 38th parallel. There is an urban legend in Korea that during the Japanese occupation, the Japanese investigated the Korean peninsula's dragon veins and nailed down iron spikes at crucial points to disrupt the country's energy flow and disturb its fate. Sangdeok concludes that the grandfather's coffin was placed above the upright coffin of the general because of the Iron Blood Brigade. During the Japanese occupation, the Iron Blood Brigade was a patriotic organization in Korea that aimed to save the country from peril and remove Onmyoji's iron nails. The brigade directly buried the grandfather's coffin, that of a traitorous official, on top, using the high-ranking official's grave's strict defense to prevent others from approaching the burial site. Hwarem speculates that the Japanese general was buried upright to protect the iron nail. To save the nation, Sangdeok insists on pulling it out. Hwarem warns that the Japanese general is a spirit with immense malice and cannot be easily defeated. After some discussion, they decide to use the strategy of luring the tiger out of the mountain. They first write exorcism scriptures on their faces before heading up the mountain where the grave is located, throwing the general's favorite fish along the mountain path and inside the grave to lure him into the forest. Hwarem will battle the general to buy time while Sangdeok tries to remove the iron nail. In the early hours of the morning, the general emerges from the grave and begins eating his favorite fish, and in the hospital, Bongil, possessed by the general, also starts chewing. Meanwhile, the general is indeed tricked, following the fish trail into the forest, where the forest inscriptions begin to work their magic. Sangdeok and Youngjun enter the grave to find the iron nail. Hwarem had previously hidden straw in a tree hollow and lit it while using mysterious spells to create the illusion that she is the tree spirit to stall for time. She asks the general to recount his history. The general explains that he was a distinguished general in the Battle of Sekigahara in Japan, more than 400 years ago. On the battlefield, he had slain enemies countless times, striking fear into the hearts of his opponents. After he died on the battlefield, Onmyoji stitched his head back on, shoved a red-hot katana into his body, and buried him upright in a meticulously calculated manner. He was cursed and became a zombie, guarding the grave and the iron nail for Japan forever. Hwarem demanded that the general release Bongil from his control. Unexpectedly, her identity was exposed in the dark forest, and the general approached Hwarem step by step. Fortunately, Hwarem's late shaman grandmother appeared just in time to help her escape. Sangdeok and Youngjun searched around the grave but couldn't find the fabled iron nail. At this point, the general had turned into a flame and was approaching Sangdeok in the grave. The instant he saw the flames, Sangdeok understood the truth. The real iron nail was the katana inside the general. The katana glowed red-hot in the fire, and when the general turned into a corpse, it fused with the ghostly flame to form fire gold. This is why the general had to be buried upright, forming an upright coffin, because the katana had to be vertically inserted into the grave's soil. It was both the flame guarding the grave and the metal driven into the soil. When the fireball rushed into the graveyard and the general was about to remove Sangdeok's liver, Hwarem, in desperation, splashed a bucket of horseblood on the general. The horseblood caused the general's armor to melt instantly, revealing the crimson katana inside. The general grabbed Hwarem and Youngjun in his unwillingness. At this critical moment, Sangdeok recalled the 5 elements theory involving metal, wood, water, and fire. Water subdues fire, and metal overcomes wood. With this in mind, Sangdeok picked up a wet wooden stick, inserted it under the general's feet, then smeared his own blood on the stick to moisten it before striking the general. The burning katana represented metal and fire, while the wet wooden stick symbolized water and wood. Using the principles of the 5 elements interactions, Sangdeok finally managed to disintegrate both the katana and the general. The general's spirit body dissipated and Bongil regained consciousness in the hospital. The century-long curse was finally lifted at the end of the story. Youngjun continued his work in funeral services, while Hwarem and Bongil resumed their shamanic practice. The injured Sangdeok eventually recovered and continued helping people with grave robbing and feng shui issues. The land once trampled by enemies seemed to have finally found some temporary peace.